Alright everyone, hello and welcome to How to Build Your Own PC. Today we're going to be building our student in the classroom's new PC. He has a full tower case. It is called a Cougar Evolution full tower. And as you can see here, we got our side view for our inside view, spot for our fan. Now if we turn our attention to the top here, we have two USB 2 ports, two USB 3, standard headphone and mic jacks. And up at the top, this is really neat. It's got a dust shield with the Cougar label on it. If you flip it down, we'll make it into an external hard drive bay where you can fit a 3.5-inch SATA drive. And also at the top, we have our variable speed control, power button, and it has two little neat buttons here for fan groups. You can set them and select them. All right, next we're going to turn our attention to the front of the case. All right, you can see a very nice, very clean Cougar label here at the top. And the front pops off. A bunch of you are probably wondering, where does the optical drives go, or DVD drives? Well, these little things here pop off from the back. Sometimes you have to break these off, but on this one here it's nice. You can take them off and put them back. Got little clips here. Remove, replace. Okay. On the inside, right here, we have a screen filter where our 120mm front fan is at. And up here, we have another screen filter where you can add an additional fan for the front. Okay, slap this back on. We go to the back here. We have another 120mm fan in the back. Shield spot for motherboard, for all the integrated peripherals for the motherboard. Expansion covers, slot covers, and a bottom mount power supply. Next we're going to look at the inside of the case. Alright, in here we have a lot of space. We got our SATA cable here for our top hard drive bay. Some quick connects, our USB 3 connector. Front USB 2 connectors. Basic connectors for our power switches and LEDs up the front. Fan power connectors. Hard drive trays. You can fit 4 hard drives in here. And here we have a quick snap feature for optical drives or whatever front end device you may want to use. 5.5-inch device. Alright, next we're going to be talking about the parts that will go inside the case. This is one of ASUS's newer motherboards. It's the M5A990FX Pro Revision R, which means Revision 2.0. Alright, some of the features include precise power control, a remote go one-stop entertainment feature, true UASP support, easy BIOS flashback, direct BIOS access, super speed USB, which means our USB 3.0. It's Windows 8 ready so for anyone who wants to run Windows 8 on it, it'll have full support for it. NVIDIA SLI ready, so you can, if you want to do Crossfire SLI dual or triple graphics cards, you can. Unlocked FX processor slot so you can upgrade your processors or overclock them, and a 9 series chipset from AMD. Alright, next we're going to be talking about the processor that's going to be going inside the motherboard. Alright, this is an unlocked FX series, FX 6100 AMD 6-core processor Black Edition. So you'll get 6 physical cores with this. Now we're going to introduce the power supply. This is a Xeon 700-watt modular power supply. For those of you who don't know what modular means, it means the power connectors can be either connected or removed directly from the power supply, and we'll be showing that later on in our video. It'll have basic motherboard, 20 plus 4-pin motherboard connector, 2 4-pin connectors for your CPU, a 6-pin and an 8-pin connector for graphics, 4 Molex powers, 2 floppy powers, and 6 SATA power connectors. This is the RAM or memory. Both terms are interchangeable. Alright, we've got a 16 gig kit here with 2 8GB sticks. Their speeds are running at 1866. It's the G-Skill Aries series. Next we have a nice graphics card. It's a 2GB graphics card. It's a Zotac name brand, GeForce GTX 650. put in the PCI Express ports, which we'll show you later on. Additionally, we're running DirectX 11 on this. So this is for the newer games, so you can run them on high settings. All right, now we're going to introduce our Blu-ray writer, or burner. This can not only burn Blu-rays, this can burn everything below it. It can burn regular Blu-ray discs, Blu-ray dual layers, DVDs, DVD dual layers, and CDs on down the line. Read them, everything. All right, and this is SATA, simple SATA. Next is our storage device. This is a Western Digital Cavalier Blue 1 terabyte hard drive. It's running at 7,200 RPMs and it has a 64 meg cache. This will also be running at SATA 6. This is our motherboard. This is our ASUS motherboard. All right, on the motherboard, we've got some heat. We've got some heat sinks covering some chipsets. Here's our processor socket. This is where our 6-core processor will go. Here's our brackets for our heat sink.
What socket?
Oh, I'm sorry. Socket AM3 Plus. This is nice because he can expand from a 6-core to an 8-core later on if he wants to. Here's our little RAM channels, memory channels. They're running dual channel memory. It can hold up to 32 gigs max. Right. Here's our power connector for our 20+4 pin from our power supply. USB 3 connector for our front end USB 3s. Some cases we'll have back end. CPU fan, SATAs, 6 SATAs. You'll get a better look at them later. We have 3 PCIe slots for graphics and a regular PCI slot. All right. We have more fan connectors. Over here is where our connectors go from our case for our power switches. And we have some USB connectors over here for the USB 2s. All right. Now, underneath this, we have some SATA 6 cables. Comes with 2 packs. SATA 6. All right. Now, this is one thing ASUS is known for, and it's nice of them to have. They have quick connectors. All right. What these quick connectors are made for is you attach your power switches, the wires from your power switches onto this, and you just slide this over the pins on the motherboard. So you don't have any real risk of bending in the pins. And it's just an easy slip-on. Okay. SLI cable bridge device for if you're running dual graphics cards. And our shield for the back of our case. And of course our motherboard user guide. This is our thermal shield. This is what connects to our back port here. This is what all the connectors for the integration, for the peripherals integrated on the motherboard will fit through. Okay, you just slide it in here. And clip it in. Next we're going to put our motherboard in. Okay. It'll fit in here. The important thing to remember is to keep everything on the integrator lined up with these holes on the thermal shield. All right, next we're going to talk about the different types of screws that come with the motherboard. All right, here we have hex heads. We have hex head screws. Now, these are preferable to use on the motherboard as opposed to some round-headed screws, which I'll show you in a few minutes. These are preferable because you can use a hex head driver like this and slip it over it. Now, the reason for this being preferable is because if you use a regular screwdriver, you have the chance to slip off, hit the board, and damage the board, and possibly make it an unworking board. All right. Next, we have some self-tapping screws. These are used whenever you want to add extra fans in. Self-tapping means that whenever clear plastic hole, there's no threads in it. These will make their own thread whenever they enter in. You got these little guys. You got these little screws here. These have got the little washer set on the outside. These are typically made for drives, like hard drives and optical drives, floppy drives, etc. These are bumpers or standoffs. These are extras in case you have a smaller form factor board, like a micro ATX, that typically will have some space under there and you've got some push room. Now you don't want that, is because you can actually crack the board if you put too much pressure in there with that much push room, damage the runs. Next we have our standoffs, which this case actually required us to put in 3 standoffs for the back into the motherboard, so it could even itself out. And these are also for if you have a different form factor board as well. Some are pre-punched, these are add-ins. And these are round-headed screws, which I was talking about. These usually are extras for little extra add-in devices, or maybe drives. Installing the screws for our motherboard. Okay, so our last one. Next, we're going to move on to installing our processor and heatsink. All right, this is our AMD 6-core processor. As you can see here, we got the processor itself, and here's our badge. You know, you put it on the front of your case. It lets people know what you have inside of it, what you're running inside of it. Now, another important thing about the processor is you have to pay attention to this pin layout whenever you put it in your socket on the board. You get it wrong, you can end up bending or damaging or breaking off pins. This has to be correct. Usually you got a little gold triangle indicator here, and there'll be a similar triangle indicator on the socket. Here on the socket, we've got our bail system or lever. All right.
Open position now.
It's in an open position now.
It's a zip socket.
It's a zip socket, 0 insertion force. What happens is you put the processor in, you lock the lever down, and the little contacts move up against the pins, locking against the pins on the processor. All right. Right here's our little triangle indicator in this corner. You might or might not be able to see it, but you would match it up with this triangle indicator here on the processor. Okay. I'll put it in right now. And it should go in with minimal effort like so. Then you just push the lever down and lock it in. Next we're going to talk about putting the heatsink on top of the processor. Alright, heatsink has a fan on top, so air's blowing in and keeping it cool, helping keep it cool. Alright, now this heatsink has a raised copper medallion, which is the small circle of thermal paste. What we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit extra to the square around here, just to give us a warm and fuzzy. Okay. Now as you see, most of you guys are used to probably seeing a tube being squeezed on here. Well, this is a nice fingernail, kind of like a fingernail bottle brush thing going here, because you can add a nice even coat without having to worry about goop and thermal paste everywhere.
In this case, with a medallion, it probably won't matter, but some cases that don't have the raised medallion, it would be important to put it on.
Right.
We'll put a little bit on the medallion also.
Right, because I've seen it myself. Sometimes the factory doesn't always get it right. Sometimes accidentally the robot will put a little bit less because it ran low at the time. We're going to put a little bit extra, another layer on top of the already factory layer, if it'll let us, which it is. It's good.
Gently, so as not to disturb the factory layer.
Gently, as you do not disturb the factory layer. Now this heatsink has a lever system. All right, on the motherboard we have 2 attachments here. It can only go on one way. All right. If you're another kind of heatsink, you have these indentations here to show you which way to put it, so it doesn't hit any capacitors or any other parts on the board and possibly damage it. All right, we're gonna put it in this way. Set it down there. And one of the key things you're going to try to have to remember is don't slide this around too much. All right, sometimes you'll have a bit of a fight with it. There we go. Okay, it's in here, we put that down, and then we push this blue lever over and lock it down. And we have our fan connector here. Plug it into one of the CPU fan connectors. We're going to install the RAM modules, or RAM sticks as they're sometimes called. All right, this is the G-Skill Aries series. This is an 8 GB stick. We're going to be installing 2 of them. All right, here's our name brand. On the back side here, or the front, depending on which way you want to look at it, it's got our specs. All right, as you can see, it's operating at an 1866 frequency, and it's DDR3. All right. Now, if you're wondering what the blue is on the outside of this, not all RAM sticks will have this. It's a heat
Case
sink.
and a heat sink.
It's encased in a heat sink to help disperse heat. All right, and we just slide it in there like that. Push down. That locks itself in.
Explain the tabs.
And the tabs are to help lock it in place. All right. Open tabs to unlock it so you can interchange them if you need to.
Let me see the far end.
You got it?
Okay, the far end on this one does not.
Okay, the far end on this one does not open, which is a bit unusual because on a lot of boards, both sides unlock, are movable. Okay, we'll slide our second module in, push down, and that locks it in. All right, and we have 16 gigs of RAM in our board. All right, now these are, okay, now we're going to talk about installing our chassis fans, or our case fans. Chassis fans into the case, onto the motherboard, so they'll turn on, so they'll power up and spin whenever you turn the motherboard on. These are usually pretty self-explanatory. On the motherboard, you'll see CHA fan 3. Some of them will have different markings that'll indicate what they're made, what these connectors are made for. Just simply line up the pins, plug it in. Here and one here. We're going to be installing our power supply. It's a 700 watt power supply modular power supply made by Xeon. Now what modular means is not all the cables are connected directly to the power supply when you buy it. You'll have little modular slots here where you can plug extra cables in. Okay, got a modular slot here. So you're not worried with a whole bunch of power supply cables running everywhere through your case.
The extra cables are out of the way.
They're out of the way, and you don't have to, and it's a lot easier to cable manage. Now this, just slide it in there like so, and then you screw it in. We're putting in the last screws, secure our power supply, and there. Next, we're going to install our graphics card. Right? This is a Zotac card. It's a GeForce GTX 650 with 2 gigabytes of DDR5. And it's made to support DirectX 11. All right. Our outputs are, we've got 2 DVI slots, DVI-I and DVI-D, and 2 HDMI ports. All right. Next, we're going to choose the location to install our graphics card. All right. We're going to install it in our top PCIe slot for airflow reasons. Because if we were to put it in the bottom one, we wouldn't have very much space between the power supply and the graphics card. And the graphics card here. All right, so also keep in mind to please take out the correct,
in this case 2.
Yeah, in our case 2 expansion slots here.
Or slot covers.
Slot covers. Expansion slot covers. Okay, we're going to pull out our second and third. And you want to hold on to those screws we just took out because they're going to be important in holding down the graphics card. Okay, very gently slide it in there. Okay, now we get our card in. We're going to put our screws back. Okay, just get them started. We'll use the screwdriver to secure them. Okay, and we have installed our graphics card. One of the things we've overlooked when building this is static discharge. All right, and that was our mistake. It's important to keep yourself statically discharged by simply touching something like this electrical outlet here. Now,
faceplate.
Faceplate. Now, we've been doing this.
Metallic.
It's metallic. And one of the reasons for doing this is static discharge can kill the components inside the case. Right? You won't run into static discharge everywhere, or at least you won't run into a very high chance of it in some places. Some places they're dry and they have the heat, you may have the heat on because it's a cold environment. You'll run into a higher level of static discharge by walking across the carpet. Now, what we got here is a static wrist strap. Right? Normally you would attach this to your wrist and then attach it to the case. Attach it to the case, the metal part of the case. Easier part up here. But like I said, in reality, this doesn't really work unless the case itself is grounded. We're installing our hard drive, all right? This is our Western Digital Cavalier Blue 1 terabyte drive. All right, now we're gonna install this, but we're not gonna have the SATA connectors facing this way. We're gonna have them facing inward because in the back of the case, you can take the back panel off and it's got a little space back there for cable management. We're gonna install our SATA connectors pointing that way for cable management purposes, so you don't have cables running everywhere. All right, these slide out. This won't be the case on all cases, on all these. Just to be aware of that. All right, slip our hard drive in. Line up the holes, and then you slide these guys back in and they'll lock in place. Alright, then we take her and slide it in there like so, and we've installed our hard drive. Alright, next step is we're going to install our optical drive. Alright, as you can see, we have our case standing up for this because the front panel has to pop off. All right, our front panel has to pop off. You pull from the bottom here and pop it off. All right. Now, another thing I almost forgot to show you. This does not require screws to pop these things in and out. They're little quick connectors here. This is unlock. This is lock. All right. We're gonna unlock this one. Turn our case back around. And we got a bunch of cables in the way, but okay, locks in place. Now, next we're going to take off one of our front panel pieces here so we can have room for the optical drive to pop out. Okay, the second one more specifically. All right, like I said, you just pull these tabs back and it pops out nice and neat. And as I mentioned earlier, some of these required you to actually break them off, so if you ever had to take your optical drive out or you didn't want it there, you were with a big open space. And now we got a nice flush fit on the front, and we have our optical drive installed. We're going to be hooking up our top chassis controllers. Right? Here we have our USB 3 wire. As you can see, for most of you who are used to hooking up USB 2, this is a bit different now. All right? Hook it up to our spot right here. Okay, slide that wire in there nice and neat so it's out of our way. Okay. This is our USB 2 controller for our front end USB 2s. And we can plug it in right here. Alright. Next is our front end audio. See, we got an HD audio connector, and that'll end up going right here.
Be careful to absorb the pin.
Yes.
Make sure
another thing to be careful to observe is your pin layout. There's a blank spot on these, and back on the older style cases, they didn't have a blank spot. All right, you had to look at the motherboard manual a few times before you could figure it out. Or key, I'm sorry. All right. Now they have the key in here on the pin layout. All right, so it's easy to figure out. Pretty easy to figure out. All right. Here we have a SATA cable for our front end hard drive slot, hard drive bay. All right. We'll plug it into our SATA right here. All right, next we have two different sets of Molex connectors. All right, this one here is made to power the entire front, pretty much the entire front chassis controls.
From off the power supply.
From off the power supply. And this one here is made to power the hard drive, the external hard drive bay. All right, next we have our Quick Connects connector here. This is nice, ASUS makes it. You put your case connectors in here. That way, if anything does have to change, you can just, you see it plugs in there. If anything does have to change, let's say you have to get a replacement motherboard, you just slide it out and slide it back in. Next, we're going to be talking about the power supply connectors. All right, we have two permanent fixed connectors, which are made for our motherboard. These are the only things that you cannot remove from the power supply. All right, this is our 4x2 connector for our CPU. Slide up here. that in there. If it wants to cooperate. There we go. And this one here I routed back through here for cable management purposes. And this is our 24-pin connector. That gets hooked up here to the motherboard.
Let me zoom in.
Okay. All right, we have those two connected. Next, we're going to be hooking up our cables for our modular power supply. All right, this end goes into the power supply. Put it on the bottom here. And this is our SATA power. This will be for our optical drive and our hard drives. But we have them in two different locations, so we'll have to do two different sets of cables. Well, they'll end up going like this then. One for that. And later on I'll have these cable managed properly. This is our second SATA set. Alright. And it will go through the back of the case. Run it through right here. Connect to our hard drive right here. Okay, this is our modular connector for our graphics card. Plug it in here, and plug this in into our graphics card here. All right, this will be populating our Molex connectors with our top side case chassis controls. So we'll plug that in right there. And we only need two to populate, so we'll have this one right here. Plug into here. And we'll have this one right here. Plug into here. Okay. Like I said, we'll cable manage this a little bit later on. And we have all of our power connectors hooked up. You can't really see all of our cables that well. That's because they're cable managed. This case and a lot of the newer, bigger cases now are made with a little bubble behind the back, little space behind the back where you can run your cables behind it for cable management. So you don't have cables hanging everywhere in the front of your board. Now, next we're going to install our SATA cables so our optical drive and hard drive can work with our board. Okay, we'll plug this into SATA 1, which is down here, this bottom spot, if I can find it. There we go. We're going to hook this around to our hard drive. And as you can see, all of our wires are back here. Okay.
Got it.
See it. And we plug this into our SATA data on our hard drive right there. All right. Next, we'll hook up our optical drive with our second SATA cable. All right, we'll plug this into SATA 2, which is right above SATA 1. And this is just as simple as plug it into your data here. And we have ourselves a built PC. Alright, and we have completed our build. This is what it looks like with everything inside of it, and it turned on. The fan's spinning. You got power indication lights going. And we don't have a monitor hooked up to it, but it works. That's the point. This concludes our build.